Hello and welcome. My name is Nadia Denton. I'm a film curator based in the UK. On behalf of CineDB Insights, I'm delighted to introduce this special interview. This piece is a part of the CineDB Africa Conversation Series, a collection of in-depth encounters with film professionals from the continent developed by a group of African curators as part of the CineDB Africa project of the Goethe Institute. It is now accessible through the e-portal of the Durban Film Art Institute, the new home of CineDB Africa. Today, I am joined by Dorothee Wenner. Dorothee is a curator at the Berlin International Film Festival. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dorothee.
It's an honor.
So, Dorothee, you're one of the veterans of the Berlin Film Festival. You have many years of experience internationally in Europe and Africa, other parts of the world. I wondered if you could just start off by sharing some suggestions and tips about how filmmakers can best prepare when they are planning to attend an international film market, such as the EFM, which is part of the Berlin International Film Festival.
I think it makes a huge difference whether you participate as a filmmaker or producer who has a film in the official program, or if you have other activities that you want to pursue. And I think it's very good to take time and sufficient time in advance to really know, why do you want to come? Do you want to come to see films, to see movies and meet people? Fine, that's easy. You don't need too much of a preparation time. But if you have something to achieve, for instance, you want to pursue your project, the next film that you want to do, you have to analyze, where do I stand? Am I at the very beginning? Do I look for a co-producer? Do I look for financiers? This depends very much on in which phase of your project you're in. Once you have made that clear for yourself, and you, for instance, attend the EFM, the European Film Market, I need to explain, European Film Market doesn't mean that it's only for European films, but it takes place in Europe, but is for films internationally. So it's a meeting ground. So by the time you apply, which is costly, you really want to make sure that you know why you're going. You have access to all the people who are attending the market. So make sure you have a good plan in advance, who you want to meet and why. For instance, you're looking for a co-producer. We have a feature in our festival, which is called the co-production market. Now, this you can access and attend, but it's not about your project, because that project needs to be selected well in advance. We also have similar projects in our program, which is called Berlinale Talents. This is very interesting, especially for up-and-coming filmmakers. Not first-time short filmmakers. You have to have a certain profile. You have to have had, now I don't know exactly, I think 3 short films in an international festival, or an equivalent reputation as a filmmaker to attend talents. There you can, and you have the chance to attend as producer, as director, but you can also apply as composer. All other fields of work are reserved. So it's worthwhile really exploring the features and the options beyond submitting your short film, your feature film, your animated film, your series, or which other films you might have in stock, which you want to bring to Berlin.
That's excellent. And of course, some of what you've indicated about filmmakers engaging with some of the industry activity requires a certain amount of networking. And certainly I know from my experiences of working with filmmakers that networking can be quite challenging and people can feel quite nervous. And especially this idea of, approaching established and senior figures in the industry. What suggestions might you give around how filmmakers can best network, whether it's with like-minded filmmakers or with particular industry figures when they're trying to make a good impression?
What you want to do is you check in case, now it's me, Dorothee Wenner at Berlinale.de. You send me a mail with a brief, what you want to do, what you want to achieve. Don't send me your script, please, and say, well, give me feedback on my script, or don't send me your 10 hours series. At this time of the year, I don't have time to watch this or to read this. I do read scripts. I like to read scripts, but I can't, if somebody is just expecting based on, watching a 10 hours series, that maybe not, I want to come. So what you want to do is to understand what might be the mutual interest. So I want to get a log line, maybe a brief synopsis. Tell me where you stand and what is your expectation of when you come to Berlin, what you want to achieve, and then I will answer.
That's really clear. Thank you. That is so helpful, because I think filmmakers often don't realize that they also have a bit of power in the fact that they are the talent. And
Yeah.
obviously they have the content,
Yes.
the content that the
Absolutely.
festival seeks.
Yeah.
But it's just really understanding how to negotiate that in terms of communicating in the right way. So that's good. It's nice to get a curator actually saying they welcome getting these emails.
Yeah, and it's something maybe just to add, for instance, the fund that is attached to the Berlin Film Festival, where I'm on the jury and consultant. It's a lot of work to do a submission for the World Cinema Fund. Maybe it's easier to reflect first, is my project at the right stage? So they're the same thing. You write an email to info@ to my colleagues, or you can also even write those emails to me and say, well, I would be really interested in submitting my project to the World Cinema Fund, but is it the right moment? Because one of the criteria of the World Cinema Fund, different from other funds in Europe and elsewhere, is that we have a profile where we like to support films shortly before they go in actual production. So we don't do a lot of seed funding. So if you submit your film once and then maybe it's only the first draft of your script, maybe it's not such a good idea, because you can only submit once. Of course, sometimes we do say to the filmmaker, well, resubmit because we like what we've seen, but it's not at the right stage. But sometimes it really helps to write directly to the person in charge.
And just thinking a bit more broadly about the industry and content coming from Africa, you've touched on some points to consider for the World Cinema Fund, and definitely this idea of African filmmakers, I suppose, being as competitive as their contemporaries from other parts of the world is an important one. What do you think are some of the biggest commercial and or creative selling points in terms of the African continent and its various regional diversities?
One of the realities that really helps filmmakers to accept is that maybe earlier than European counterparts, it really helps African filmmakers to be kind of clear or look for clarity what kind of a film you want to make and who do you want to address. So I don't think I need to explain to African filmmakers that there is a lack of cinema structure. So there is no commercial market except maybe in South Africa, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and some other places where you might have a bit of revenue. But there are ways of finding ways. And if you want to access a broad audience in African countries, yes, it is possible, but it depends on your film. So be clear what you want to achieve, knowing that your country is most likely not, welcoming a film, beautiful as it might be. So if you want to go into this direction of making a film for the International Film Festival circuit, that's very often a different kind of film that the audience wants. So I've been working also for the Dubai Film Festival, and I'm as long as it existed, and for the AMA Awards in Nigeria. And, you know, 2-3 times a year, one film was here in Berlin, in Dubai, and at the African Movie Academy. The way of how the films were discussed, you wouldn't think we were talking about the same film, because people were looking for different audiences and for different tastes. And I think this is very legitimate. So it's not about the best film, but how the film finds its audience. And this is very different. To be clear, to give you one example, educational films are not very much in favor, or, you know, big fashion among Western film curators. So a quote amongst my colleagues here in Berlin is, "Oh no, it's so educational, I can't stand it." When I go to Lagos and ask someone coming from the cinema, in the cinema hall, a regular moviegoer, "Why did you like this film?" I've so often heard, "Oh, I loved it because I learned so much." And this is not because I think this is better than the other, but we have to accept that films are consumed and watched and perceived in different realities.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I think it kind of touches on an important point, which again is a bigger conversation about film literacy. You know,
Yes.
obviously audiences across the world have different levels of
Yes.
film literacy, and so
Yeah.
that will tend to inform their tastes.
Yeah.
But when you've mentioned earlier that, you know, the filmmakers should be clear about the kind of film they're making, can I just be clear? Are you referring to the genre or the actual aspects of the film, or both?
All.
Yeah.
So I think you can make a documentary that is absolutely avant-garde, and you can make a documentary that fits for TV-ish kind of use. But you can also look, for instance, into ways of how films are commissioned and made, and most African filmmakers are aware, you know, that foundations might be as much as an important source of income or finding finances for a film. And that is not only malaria prevention, but I think this is a very interesting phase also in our lives, where the foundations have realized, because of the high you know, number of illiteracy in many African countries, that next to radio and internet, film is an important tool. So you can make a very, very good film that might also make it into the festival circuit, but not necessarily about, you know, the position of women, conflict between parents, you know, something that is of interest to convey. So it will have an educational side, but not with, you know, you feeling yourself being pushed back into school 8th year. So,
Yeah.
and I think, for instance, humor or, you know, thriller, different ways of how films can be used, I think is even something that, you know, post-COVID is something that we really have to take into consideration very freshly, very new, in order to find new audiences, how to access them. This is a big void at the moment, that not only in African countries, but also here, we are looking at what do we do with film? Why you know, going to the movies? This has changed here as well as in Africa, with maybe more dramatic, more commercial consequences in the African countries, just given the aggressiveness of how streamers today try to enter, is maybe too friendly a word, but really to you know, to access the market in a way that is completely I think underestimated at the moment, because the market is there.
You referred to the COVID-19 pandemic, and certainly during the pandemic, with all the various online conversations and discussions, there were talks about how things had changed. I mean, from your point of view, what do you think that the pandemic has probably changed permanently in terms of the film industry, or the way that we talk about film or enjoy film?
We will not go back to pre-pandemic. In my view, what we all people who love cinema, what we need to do now is to reinvent cinema as a space. Yeah. This is, I think, is what is most important. And it cannot be the same if I'm running a cinema here around the corner where I live in Berlin, or when I'm running a cinema in Nairobi, or when I'm somewhere in rural Sudan or elsewhere. This has to be site specific. This has to be, I have to know my audience. And for instance, one activity that I'm doing besides curating is trying to have a self-help network between independent cinema initiatives. It's called Cinema Spaces Network, where we cooperate with independent cinemas from 7 African countries and trying to also work on a new distribution scheme, bringing African or African diaspora content to the continent.
And I completely agree with what you're saying in terms of this idea that we have to kind of recreate cinema, or at least that appetite for people to enjoy it in a particular way. And certainly as, you know, exhibitors, curators, and, you know, people who deal with festival admin, we can't take it for granted how we will get those audiences. In summary, I wondered if you had any film predictions for 2023, or if indeed there are any patterns or trends that you think will be more pronounced post-pandemic in the industry as a whole.
That's very hard to say. I don't know, but I think what a lot of people like, but this might be also my personal taste, I'm not so sure. But I've seen a bit too much heaviness, and you know, the world is in such a messy, horrible state. And I think what is missing is intelligent humor. So you know, it's not escapism that I'm promoting, but there is something that you want to get when you go to the cinema that opens up new doors, takes you out somewhere else. And for me, I'm of the belief that humor and intelligence and using new ways of storytelling in a different way do have a huge bridge building function, and that is between filmmakers and audiences, but also between regions of the world.
And on that point on humor is quite tricky at times because it can be cultural specific. So I don't know if you have any comments about that, but because of course the thing that might be funny to X particular type of audience may not be funny to Y. So do you think that there are particular types of humor that elevate themselves or can translate more widely?
I think humor travels very with lots of difficulties in cinema, but it's not impossible. And there are so many wonderful examples where the moment you're telling something to an audience that does cross this border, that's huge. I mean, I know what I'm talking about because our commercially most successful German comedies are not being sold to any other country. So it's not that this is an African problem, this is a very particular German problem, maybe even. But I think to give it a try, and you know, and I think here globalization might have some aspects where we can see that we don't exclusively need these Matrix superhero going into the Middle Ages, you know, like this allowing cinema to be a place where our reality is reflected, but in a way that you know, the demands of the streamers don't want, and you know, where you really have new territories to explore. I think there's a huge potential.
Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights with us today. It's been a very thought-provoking conversation, and one that I believe those watching will get much to reflect on. So
Thank you
you
very much.
again,
Thanks.
Dorothy.
Thank you.